Welcome to Alice Just Alice 55. You're listening to an AI-narrated audiobook version of my original story, The Unclaimed Werewolf, an Unbound Wolves novel, written by Alice N. Smith. Chapter 18, Where the Noise Falls Away. The forest went still, not all at once, not dramatically. It simply failed to interrupt her. Nora noticed because she was waiting for it. She stood at the edge of her territory longer than she needed to, human and barefoot, attention stretched outward, listening for the scrape of unfamiliar movement, the faint drag of unfamiliar scent on the air. Morsel sat beside her, head tilted slightly, ears twitching at sounds that didn't matter. Nothing came. She stayed anyway. By midday, the ground had begun to forget. The overlapping traces that had made her borders feel crowded, layered male scents, restless pacing, the lingering arrogance of presence without permission, were thinning. Not gone, but broken apart instead of stacked. Old enough that the forest was reclaiming them. Her shoulders loosened a fraction at a time, the tension bleeding off so slowly she didn't notice it leaving. They walked. Not a patrol, not a search, just movement for its own sake. She followed a familiar path down toward the creek, Morcel trotting ahead and then circling back, satisfied as long as she stayed within reach. The water was low and clear, sunlight flashing on stone. She sat on the bank and let her feet sink into the cold, leaning back on her hands. No one howled, no one announced themselves, no one lingered at the borders like an unanswered question. She closed her eyes. The quiet was deliberate. That was the part that bothered her. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fear spreading naturally through rumor or injury. It had shape, timing, gaps where there had been none before. Brooks. She opened her eyes again, gaze tracking the canopy overhead. He had said he would manage his side of the problem. She hadn't expected him to start before telling her. A flicker of something crossed her chest. Annoyance, perhaps? Or appreciation? She didn't bother naming it. Naming things gave them weight, and she wasn't ready to decide what this deserved. Morcel nudged her knee with his nose. She scratched absently behind his ear, fingers moving without thought. "Don't start assuming this means anything," she told him quietly. "People disappoint, consistently." He huffed and leaned into her leg, unimpressed. She stayed longer than she usually allowed herself. Her thoughts drifted, uninvited, back through the visitors who had actually registered. Not the noise, not the loud ones who'd arrived full of certainty and left empty-handed. The few who had lasted long enough to matter. Brooks, obviously, controlled, irritating, careful in a way that suggested planning instead of fear. He hadn't looked at her like a prize or a problem. He'd looked at her like terrain, dangerous, valuable, and not to be mishandled. That didn't make him safe. It made him competent. And then there was Eamon. She frowned slightly, surprised at how easily the name surfaced. He'd been different from the beginning. Not loud, not confident in the way the others had been. Nervous, yes, but not weak. He'd watched more than he'd spoken, like he was trying to understand something instead of claim it. And he'd listened. That alone set him apart. She hadn't decided what to do with that yet. The rest blurred together when she tried to recall them. Faces without edges, voices without weight, scents that hadn't lasted long enough to matter. She supposed that was the point. As the sun dipped lower, Morcel rose and stretched, tail wagging once in quiet suggestion. She stood brushing dirt from her palms and followed him back toward the den. Still nothing crossed her land. Still no one tried. That night she slept longer than she had in weeks. Not deeply, not carelessly, but without one part of her listening for footsteps that never came. As sleep took her, one thought lingered, unwelcome but persistent. Brooks had acted before asking, which meant either he respected her time or he'd already decided how this would go. She wasn't sure which unsettled her more.